I'll never forget my first Halo experience, and you never do.
Intense story and also intense gameplay.
The whole Halo universe, the arc of the entire universe, is one of discovery.
The universe is extremely huge. The storyline is epic and full of conflict.
The Halo universe kind of encompasses the core of science fiction.
All the stuff that you come to expect from great science fiction, but you could play it and feel really involved in it.
Storytelling is no longer passive. It's now interactive.
Halo is incredibly important to Microsoft. It's the foundation of our universe in gaming.
Halo is one of the definitive games of our time. Well, there was this little game that everyone was waiting for called Halo. That was supposed to be a computer game. And we're sitting around and we're waiting for it. You can go to shows and you see screens from it. It looks great, and it's not coming. An interesting thing happens. Microsoft announces that it's coming out with a console, and that Halo, this game that everyone's been waiting for, is going to be for that console.
There's such anticipation for Halo. It had been in the news for so long. We were like, what's this game gonna be? What's it gonna be? Heard it was launching on Xbox, awesome. But we didn't know really what to think about the Xbox. We really didn't want to think of Halo. So we sat down in the office and they started demoing it. From the opening screen, everybody was looking around at each other like, oh, this is something else. There's this weird chant, it's this space thing. You could almost feel at that moment that a franchise was beginning. It was just this beautiful sort of burgeoning thing. I can remember the meeting afterwards where we kind of like informally met after Microsoft had left the building, and we were like, was that not the raddest thing you've ever seen?
When we were first developing the first console, Xbox One, we were looking for partners, long-term partners, that we felt would be first-party games going forward. When we were looking at Bungie, it was a very talented group of people, and they were working on some games that we thought would be good for a launch for our console.
When Halo 1 first came out, it was the very first Xbox One game that I played, and I was at id Software at the time working on Quake 3, I think. And we got Halo 1 and we got it into the office and we got a bunch of controllers and we're sitting there playing it. And obviously, at id, we were very, PC oriented. We were very, keyboard and mouse. And we were somewhat skeptical that first-person shooter would work on the console. We played that game, and it was fantastic, and the experience was fantastic. And we were convinced that a first-person shooter was now possible on a console. It changed our minds.
When Halo 1 came out, it came out with the original Xbox's launch, and it really put Xbox and Microsoft in terms of console gaming on the map. This was the game that, because it had 4-player split-screen co-op on one machine, everybody was playing it in college with their buddies.
It did the first-person shooter thing right for the first time, really, on a console. You could say that GoldenEye kind of did that on Nintendo, but it wasn't, there were still frame rate issues, there were still issues with the game in general, and when Halo came around, it was like, just all that stuff had been fixed. It was a beautiful game, it played beautifully.
But what Halo really did was it took the idea of multiplayer gaming and it pushed it outside of one screen. If you think about what Halo 1 did for LAN parties, clearly people were playing on LAN prior to Halo shipping. But Halo allowed you to just grab a little black box, cruise down the dorm hall, grab all your buddies, and all of a sudden you're playing a 16-player game. As we moved later into the life of Xbox One, along comes Xbox Live. And the expectation obviously was there for, from a user perspective and obviously from inside Microsoft, that we could try and push that feeling that came around Halo 1 and help establish Xbox Live. Clearly it worked. Halo set the bar that really hasn't been matched since. Everyone knows there's other great games on Live. Live isn't just about Halo. And yet Halo continues to be the game that can drive hundreds of thousands of people a day.
I think Halo was successful on the console because Bungie did do an amazing job balancing the controls. It is a highly polished game.
You never found yourself getting bored while playing the game, especially in multiplayer. It was just so quick and fast. And that was something that really hadn't happened for the console.
What Halo made possible was that it improved on the PC gaming experience, and that actually made it a console experience.
And I think there's a real fan community based on the fact that the multiplayer was always so amazing. From the get-go, Halo multiplayer has kind of like set the gold standard for console shooters.
Halo does for Microsoft what Super Mario 64 did for the N64, which is it gave people a reason to buy the Microsoft Xbox. In fact, for the first few years, people referred to the Xbox as the Halo delivery system.
The two biggest nuggets behind the success of Xbox are Halo and Xbox Live. And those two engines have really combined to get us to the point where we are today, where we're helping redefine the way people consume media and entertainment in general.
The original Halo Combat Evolved, it was the killer app for the original Xbox. You had to buy the Xbox. You had to play this game.
I mean, Bungie's a talented team. They were going to put out a great game regardless, but having a successful FPS on the console was something that I don't think anyone anticipated, and they obviously nailed it.
But we've all seen great games go out there and not do as good as Halo, or not do good at all. I don't think anyone that I knew was prepared for how successful Halo would be.
The reason why Bungie didn't bother to have us ever see Master Chief's face is that this is a first-person shooter. You don't really get to see Master Chief most of the time. It's because you're supposed to be so immersed in the experience that you feel that you are the Master Chief.
You are the one inside of the helmet. And that's especially important when you think about it, because in the case of the Master Chief, it is a first-person shooter, first-person perspective.
Yeah, Master Chief in particular represents a huge challenge as far as game design and game narrative, in that he's got very few things to say, and it's really hard to move his story arc forward because you have to depend on other characters to do that. But on the other hand, players can put their own persona into that character because he is pretty quiet and he doesn't present his own face in the game. So that offers like a great canvas for game design.
Even though the elements, for example, in the helmet of the Chief have design, you still can know the shape of the Chief's helmet from far away because it has a very streamlined kind of shape. And then you have this like green element with the very like gold, yellow like visor on top of it. So you know it's a Chief from far away, but when you see it close, you can see all this detail also. So having this very good design, very nice silhouette on some of the characters that you can distinguish from far away, it's something that not many games have.
The appeal of Master Chief is that you get to be the single most badass weapon that ever existed on the planet. And I don't know, I guess that speaks to people. He's, you know, the strong silent type.
Halo 3 ODST, you see that we have a different character, the Rookie, who doesn't have that same Mjolnir armor that Master Chief has, and that actually directly affects the gameplay.
There's a real rivalry there. The ODSTs resent the Spartans. They think that Spartans are spoiled, that they get all the best equipment, and the beauty of that rivalry is completely one-sided. The Spartans don't care.
Cortana is so centrally important to who Master Chief is. I mean, she's an AI that basically lives inside his head, and that when we start to feel like Master Chief, you know, we feel like Cortana is a part of us.
Cortana is a naked lady. People love her. She's smart. She goes with him everywhere. They have a relationship. It's great. Is this your sister? Is this your something else? Everybody has a different read of their relationship. But ultimately, she's the hot chick in the series, and let's be real, people love that.
You're not defining the cool factor so much as you're taking out the nerd factor. When you've got a chubby little plumber running around saving the world and bombing folks by jumping on them, you know, nobody wants to run around and say, hey, I'm a fat little plumber. Historically speaking, you've got to say that at least on the PC side, Valve sort of started that off with their work on Half-Life, where Valve looked at first-person shooters and they said, you know what, we're going to take this one step further. And what they did that no one did before them was they hired a professional novelist to come in and write a script and write a storyline. Halo took it even a step beyond that.
I think this level of story continuity is an innovation with Halo being part of a game universe. I think if you look at other big universes like Star Wars or Star Trek, it compares to that. And it's just, we haven't seen that before in the game universe. This is actually the first time I think I've seen such a complicated and fantastic, deep storyline and history inside any game universe.
It was cool to see this world come to life with a rich story and sort of, you know, all the stuff that you come to expect from great science fiction, but you could play it and feel really involved in it.
You know, I'll always remember the first time I played through the Halo campaign. I think, and it's still the best moment for me is when you're fighting the Covenant on the Halo ring, and they're falling back, and all of a sudden something's going on over there, and they start running back at you. That's a great moment. You're like, what's going on? Of course, they've released the flood. You don't know it. You're like, something just happened, and it was a great immersive moment because at that moment I didn't feel like I was in a game anymore.
Halo as a piece of science fiction is as important to this generation as maybe Star Wars was to an earlier generation. It is the defining moment for many.
Pretty much every weekend we were playing Halo together, the very first Halo, and we would get all of our Xboxes together. We would rent projectors from the college.
When you got your system, this was the game to play. It was just unbelievable. Really sold the system, and I think for a couple of reasons. Obviously, the fact that it played really well, but you know, in addition to that, it just had a really rich story that I felt like people could get immediately into. Everything, all the little details, all the the voice work was amazing. The graphics, the textures were amazing.
You know, when you look across the trilogy, it brought so much in so many ways. We have, the original Halo Combat Evolved was such a pure experience, and there was no online. And then when Halo 2 shipped, it redefined online in every way imaginable, from the party system, from, the downloadable maps. It was just something that people had never seen before. In Halo 3, there were new tools to share your experience. With the videos and the screenshots, you could share them for the first time out of your console and across the web.
I often say that writing for video games is antithetical to story, because every time you tell story, you have to stop the game, and you're not playing the game anymore, and you really risk throwing the player out of the immersion. So you have to be very careful about what you could put in. That's where all these other layers of the franchise come in and can address that, like the novels and the comics and things like that, where you have all the space in the world to tell whatever story you want to.
People wanted more game, people wanted more fiction, so we continued to write the novels, and I think 5 of them have been on the New York Times bestseller list. We have graphic novels, we have comic books, so the fans just kept asking for more.
One of the big challenges for us with this franchise is making sure that everything is strategic and not just opportunistic. We get offers every day from all sorts of people. You want to make a Halo cartoon or a TV show, and it has to be right for the project.
Well, Halo Wars is a real-time strategy game. So in the Halo games, you get to play as Master Chief, you get to play as one person. In Halo Wars, you get to play as the entire Halo army, as all of the UNSC and all of the Covenant. So you're playing as the Scorpions, as Spartans. And it's not just one Spartan, there's many Spartans. So you actually get to play a whole army instead of just one person.
Our goal is to have basically a complete sort of set for the universe, that the game should give you some story, you should be able to go to the books or the anime and piece together the rest of the pieces of the universe.
They wanted me to write a story in between Halo 1 and Halo 2, the games. And a lot of people thought, well, there's no story between Halo 1 and Halo 2. It just ends there, and the Master Chief is at Earth, and off he goes. And I said, well, how do you get to Earth? Because at the end of Halo 1, he's drifting in deep interstellar space, and he's in a ship with no FTL drive. I'm like, oh. There's a long pause. I said, okay, go ahead and figure that out. So that was the kind of the bridging between the two games. For Ghosts of Onyx, it was a different story altogether, because now the canon had grown so expansive and so detailed. Boy, that was a tough novel to write, because it was like you had to thread through all these people, places, and events that got very dense towards the end of Halo 3. There was a lot of stuff happening, and it became a real challenge to get everything right. We had to figure out how fast is the Covenant FTL drive, because this ship is over here and it has to be over here, and there was a lot of nail biting to make everything fit. It was this giant puzzle that had to fit together.
Well, I was invited back in the 1980s, actually in the 1970s. I pitched for a Star Trek TV show, which eventually became the Star Trek motion picture, and I've been a Star Trek fan since I was a young kid. I was also a Star Wars fan from the 1970s on, and I wrote a Star Wars novel in 2000. I've written a Foundation novel as well. So I've actually covered, as I say, a lot of the universes that are pretty much canonical in science fiction. And to be invited into the Halo universe is going to be a real challenge and a real treat.
Where I come into the process and trying to make the translation of Halo into another medium is toys. And it may seem that it's not that different given that you've got 3D models in the game, and actually we were able to get our hands on a lot of them. But probably the single biggest issue we have to deal with is that the game itself is always kinetic and it's always moving. And we run into a bit of a situation when you're making toys where it's static and it's sitting on the shelf in all its glory. And some of the things you can get away with, and we've dealt with this when we've done movie toys too, where when things are moving, you can't catch up to all the information. And then as soon as you sort of stop it, it has to now be right.
Machinima is computer animation created with real-time game engines. So Halo is a perfect example of that. It has a very strong legacy in Machinima, ranging from Red versus Blue to the Spartan Live to shows like Arby and the Chief. Lots of different types of content that's been created that really exemplifies this movement, and it's getting better and better every year as the games get more sophisticated, the engines get more sophisticated, and the environments like the Xbox are more and more increasingly powerful.
Halo Waypoint is the Halo franchise destination on Xbox Live. So think of Halo Waypoint as your singular definitive location where you can go and consume anything and everything having to do with the Halo universe.
I think a really important part of any community is really that ability for users to kind of express themselves. And I think one of the big successes with the Halo franchise has been the user community kind of putting out user-generated content, whether it be map variants or screenshots and save films. And that's something that we really want to embrace within Halo Waypoint.
Mainstream media hasn't quite caught on how big video games are. I mean, people are really excited about things like Facebook and MySpace and social networking, but video games have been doing this all along.
There are two really interesting phenomena that are happening in our culture. One is the immersion, if you will, in virtual worlds that we're seeing, and Halo being a great example of that. And the second is the self-expression that we're seeing in the culture that's best exemplified by the blogosphere, by what we see happening on YouTube and other places.
I think at some point we might get rid of hardware and just stream games. So that's an interesting thing that could happen. And you know, I believe that Halo is going to benefit from that because basically the community is online all the time anyway.
You could eventually sell fans a skin suit and they could put that on and become part of the game. Looks like now with camera technology, recognition technology like Natal and so on, that you actually would be able to put a person in without a skin suit, that the camera does that for them. Basically, you're going to be doing at least two-dimensional motion capture and putting it into the game, and maybe even facial capture and incorporating that. And that puts you as a character into the game, and that's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, we believe that gaming and the culture around gaming is the real cultural revolution that we're seeing now. We've read as many as 800 million people in the world spend substantial amount of time in virtual worlds.
Halo is going in a lot of exciting directions. At least for our studio at 343 Industries, we've got this amazing collective of industry all-stars that have come together and gathered in Redmond, Washington to really push games to like at the next level, and they're just completely dedicated to this. So the Halo franchise and the future of the Halo franchise is really going to benefit from this passion that this new team is bringing. When a consumer picks up a Halo product, they have certain expectations that they wouldn't have for any other game. When they see Halo on that front cover, they know that they're going to have a deep campaign experience, awesome multiplayer, and a bunch of extra features that any other game just would definitely cut before, like in order to get that game out on time. So in order to create like a true Halo experience, you have to have this large team where you give basic ownership over to a lot of these core features. So they're developing these and polishing these features into something that's up to the Halo level of quality. So what we're talking about is something that's really involved with literally hundreds of people to put this thing together. And it has to meet a quality bar that is unique to Halo, and there's just no compromise.
As far as the future direction of the Halo franchise, we want to stay very much aware of the family that we have, the 10 million hardcore gamers who purchase our games, and we want to give them the continued product and continued experiences that that will enable them to keep coming back to our franchise as their franchise destination of choice. In addition to that, though, we do want to take Halo to a higher plateau as a franchise. And what that means is become relevant to audiences that aren't necessarily interested in the first-person shooter genre, and audiences that are going to maybe gravitate more closely to the story and the character development and the epic conflict within the Halo universe.
We can expose more people to a universe that we love, and hopefully they'll find something to like in it too.